There is something quietly running inside every human being you have ever known. It has nothing to do with confidence, and it has nothing to do with ego either. It is a deep, invisible hunger that most people carry around every single day. And honestly, the scariest part is that most people never even recognize it in themselves. You have seen it show up in someone who always makes every conversation about themselves. You have noticed in the person who constantly posts their pain and struggles online. You have even felt it yourself in moments you would probably never want to admit. This thing is called attention seeking, and it goes so much darker than you ever imagined. Most people think attention seeking is just vanity, but trust me, it is way more than that. There is a psychological machinery underneath this behavior that is ancient, powerful, and deeply human. What you are about to understand will completely change the way you see other people, and more importantly, it's going to change the way you see yourself in those quiet moments. Because this is not just about the loud, dramatic people who always need to be the center. This is about patterns buried so deep inside the human mind that most people never find them. The most powerful realization in this entire video is still coming, so stay right here with me.
If you want to understand the hidden psychology behind human behavior, subscribe to ThoughtCraft right now. We break down the deepest truths about the human mind in a way that actually makes sense. What is coming next in this video might be the most honest thing you have heard in a long time. Let us start at the very root of where this dark psychology actually comes from inside us. When you were a baby, getting attention from your parents was not a want, it was survival. Your entire nervous system was wired from birth to scream, cry, and reach out for connection. The people who paid attention to you when you were little literally kept you alive and safe. So your brain learned something incredibly powerful in those early years without you knowing it. It learned that being seen equals being safe, and being ignored equals being in real danger. And here is the thing that most people completely miss about their own adult behavior today. That childhood wiring never fully goes away, no matter how old or how mature you become. It just gets quieter, sneakier, and way more sophisticated in the way it shows up in life. And this is where it starts getting really interesting, because here's where the darkness begins.
When a child grows up in an environment where their emotional needs were constantly ignored or dismissed, something critical shifts in the way their nervous system learns to get the attention it desperately needs. They stop waiting for love to come naturally, and they start engineering situations to force it out of people. They learn to cry louder, to perform harder, to create drama that cannot possibly be overlooked or ignored. And that strategy gets locked into the brain as a survival tool during the most formative years of life. So by the time that child becomes an adult, these patterns are not choices anymore at all. They are automatic, deeply encoded responses that fire before the conscious mind even has time to intervene. But here is the part that most people never stop to think about or examine in themselves. The people who chase attention the hardest are usually carrying the heaviest and most invisible wounds inside. Behind every person who constantly needs validation is someone whose sense of self was never built solidly. Behind every person who creates drama everywhere they go is someone who learned that peace felt dangerous. Because if no one is paying attention, the old nervous system starts sending out alarm signals. It starts screaming that you are not loved, that you are not safe, that you do not matter. And the only way to quiet that alarm in the moment is to pull somebody's attention back toward you. This is why attention-seeking behavior feels absolutely compulsive to the person who is caught inside it. It is not a choice they are consciously making in the way that most outside observers tend to assume. And this is where it gets really dark, because attention-seeking does not always look the way you expect. Most people picture someone who is loud, dramatic, and constantly putting themselves in the spotlight everywhere they go. But some of the most powerful attention-seeking in the world is subtle, quiet, and almost completely invisible.
There is the person who always seems to be suffering, who always has a new crisis pulling people in. There is the person who becomes mysteriously ill or exhausted right when someone else starts getting too much attention. There is the person who constantly plays the victim in every story they tell about their own life. There is the person who posts vulnerable, emotional content online at 2 in the morning, seeking that digital validation. Psychologists call some of these patterns covert attention seeking, and it is far more common than most people realize, because the brain does not care whether the attention it gets is positive or negative. It just needs the input. Negative attention, sympathy, worry, and even anger can all quiet that internal alarm system just as effectively as love can. But here's the part that most people do not notice, and honestly, this one hit me hard when I learned it. Attention seekers are often incredibly skilled at making the people around them feel responsible for their emotional state. They unconsciously pull others into a role where the only way to feel okay is to keep giving them focus. This is what psychologists call an emotional enmeshment trap, and it is one of the most draining things you can experience. You find yourself constantly checking in on them, constantly reassuring them, constantly managing how they feel about everything. And over time, you realize that your own needs have quietly disappeared from the relationship entirely without you even noticing. This is why being close to someone with extreme attention-seeking patterns can leave you feeling emotionally completely depleted, because the relationship has slowly become a one-way system that only flows in a single direction at all times. And this is where it gets really interesting, because here's the part that very few people ever talk about. Most attention seekers genuinely do not know they're doing this to the people around them at all. Their conscious mind has a completely different story about why they act the way they act in relationships. They believe they are just being authentic, just being open, just sharing their truth in an honest way. But underneath that story, the subconscious is quietly running its old survival programming from years and decades ago. This is what makes the dark psychology of attention-seeking so heartbreaking and so complicated to deal with at once. You are not dealing with someone who is consciously calculating how to manipulate and drain you of your energy. You are dealing with someone whose nervous system is still trying to survive a childhood that ended a long time ago. Now, let's talk about what happens to the attention seeker themselves on the inside of this whole cycle.
Because here is a truth that most people never get to see from the outside of someone else's behavior. The attention, even when they get it in massive amounts, never actually fills the hole they are trying to fill. They post something online and get hundreds of likes and comments, and it feels amazing for maybe 20 minutes. Then the emptiness rushes back in harder than before, and the craving for the next hit begins all over again. They pull a friend into a crisis and get all that worry and focus and care pointed directly at them. And for a brief moment, the nervous system finally quiets down, and they feel something that resembles being okay. But within hours or days, the alarm starts firing again, because external attention can never heal an internal wound permanently. This is the dark, tragic loop at the very center of chronic attention-seeking behavior in human psychology today. The thing they are chasing can never actually give them what they are truly looking for underneath all of it. What they are really looking for is the feeling that they are enough just by existing, no performance required. And that feeling can only ever be found by doing the deep, uncomfortable psychological work from the inside outward. It requires understanding where the wound came from, grieving what was not given in childhood, and building a new internal foundation. It requires learning to self-soothe, to self-validate, and to feel safe inside your own mind without external confirmation. And honestly, that is some of the hardest and most courageous work any human being can ever choose to do. So the next time you find yourself frustrated by someone whose need for attention feels completely overwhelming and exhausting to you, try to remember for just one moment that beneath that behavior is a person who never felt fully safe or seen. That does not mean you have to sacrifice your own emotional health to fill an unfillable void in someone else's, but it might change the way you feel about them, and honestly, it might change the way you see yourself too.
Because if you look closely enough at your own patterns, you'll probably find some version of this living quietly in you. The need to be understood, to be valued, to be chosen, to matter to the people around you every day. That is not weakness. That is the most human thing in the entire world, and it lives in all of us. The difference is in whether we are aware of it or whether it is running us completely from the shadows inside. Awareness is always where the real transformation begins, and this kind of knowledge is genuinely powerful in your hands. If this video shifted something in the way you see human behavior and the psychology underneath it, subscribe to ThoughtCraft. We go deep into the hidden patterns of the human mind every single week without pulling any punches at all. Drop a comment below and tell me, honestly, do you recognize this pattern in yourself or in someone close to you? Because the people in this community are the ones who are brave enough to actually look at themselves with real honesty. And that kind of courage is exactly what changes everything, not just in psychology, but in your actual everyday real life.